semester of Excel. And so what I did was I went through and used my textbook to get our information, and then this is just a data file that had come with the book. So this is a sample spreadsheet. Notice that it's set up, you've got your title across the top. Down the left-hand side of the screen, you've got one group of headings, and then across the data, you've got another group of headings. We could have just as easily put the months down the left side and the departments across the top. That's really your preference, how you want to set up a spreadsheet. But most of them are set up in this fashion. And then you've got all of your data there in the middle. Okay, so this slide specifically, these are book sales. So we're showing each department's book sales for January through June. Here's another sample. This one is U.S. Census homeownership rates. So, but again, we see the same basic setup. The states going down the left, and then the years that were being tracked across the top with all of your data, your percentages filled in there. Anybody know why Alaska and Hawaii have some NA years? Little history lesson there.
They want to
Well,
stay.
some
They
of
were
us
not
can remember they
states.
became states.
They were not states, that's right. That's right, so that's not a typo. Those were not states at that time, so they didn't have the census data there. Okay, and then one more example, frog census. I bet y'all didn't know we tracked the census of frogs in this country as well. But again, you see the same basic setup. You've got your species, your 4 quarters. This is incomplete information. We only have 3 quarters. We're missing the 4th. So once you have your data, then how do you get these? Your totals. And that's going to lead us into our first topic of today's workshop, formulas and functions. You have 2 different terms. They each have their own meaning. You may hear people use them interchangeably, but they are not interchangeable terms. A formula is an equation used to calculate values based on numbers entered into cells. You see an example of one there. A function is a shorthand way of writing equations. And you see an example of a function there. So let's take a little bit more detailed look at these. Let's talk about formulas first. You'll notice that both of them started with an equal sign. The equal sign is just a way of signaling the program, Excel, that calculation is coming. So it's just saying, hello, we're about to do some math. That's what I tell my students. Formulas consist of 2 parts, 2 components, operand and operator. The operand is going to be either a constant, a number or text. You can, yes, calculate using text in Excel, or a cell reference. And we see some examples of both of those in these little sample formulas. We've got some constants and some cell references. The second component is your operator, and the operator is going to be based on what type of mathematical calculation you want to do. Addition, a plus sign, subtraction, a minus sign, and so forth and so on. Exponents, you'll notice the last one. To represent that, we use the caret symbol that's located on the number 6 on your keyboard, so you would shift to get that. But that would be the equivalent of saying B3 cubed in our example here. Okay, so formulas have operands and operators. How do they work? What if they have more than one operator? There is an order of evaluation. You may have also heard it referred to as order of operation, order of precedence. Depending on what math teacher you had, he or she may have used a different term. All mean the same thing, and this is that order. Anything done in parentheses is performed first. Then we go down, exponents, positives or negatives, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction are performed last, unless you had them designated to, in the parentheses to be performed first. So in our example up here, equals C3 plus C4 times C5, what's going to be performed first? The multiplication, C4 times C5. Then the computer's going to take that and add it back to C3. If I wanted the addition to be done first, what would I do? Put it in parentheses. So C3 plus C4 in parentheses, then the addition would be done first, and then the multiplication. What if my example said equals C3 times C4 times C5? Look at the last item here. If we're on the same level, so to speak, multiplication, left to right. Okay, so C3 times C4 would be performed first, and then that answer times C5. All right, any questions on formulas? Okay, let's look a little bit more closely at functions now. Functions contain three parts. Again, we start with the equal sign, as we always do, because that signals the mathematical calculation. The next part of the function is a function name. The name of the function usually gives some kind of idea about what we're doing. Sum, average. The other examples down towards the bottom, max, min, count. FV, PV, anybody know what those stand for?
Future value, present value.
Yes, future value, present value, and payment. Good. Those aren't some that we use very often, but I threw them in there. And then the last part of your function is the argument. Notice that the argument is enclosed in parentheses. So in a function, the parentheses does nothing as far as what order things are going to be performed. Okay? Has a totally different function for this as versus what we saw with the formula. The argument's enclosed in parentheses. If you don't know what function you need to use, if you go to the Insert Function dialog box, you notice that at the top you can search, type a brief description of what you are trying to do, and it will help you, guide you to that particular function, which one you need to use. All right, so a different setup for the functions. Here are some basic functions. These are the ones that probably are used the most commonly. Sum, to add all of the numbers in a selected range. Max, showing the largest. Min, showing the smallest number in the range. Average. And then count actually counts how many of those cells have a value and then displays that number. Again, notice they're all set up the same way. Equal, name of the function, and then your range is your argument. A3 through B7, or whatever range you are looking at. All of these have only one argument in parentheses. We just see one argument for each of those. The if function is another one that we can use a lot, but it has three arguments. So you have to know what each one of those does in order to get it to work right. Again, it starts with the equal sign, the name of the function if. I've got my open parentheses because my arguments have to be in parentheses. But here the first argument is a test, a logical test. In this example, C4 greater than 60. So the computer is going to look at cell C4, compare it to 60. If the number is greater than 60, argument 2 tells the computer what to do if that test is true. So if C4 was greater than 60, then the computer is going to put the word pass in that cell. Notice that it's enclosed in quotes. That's because it's text. It will actually put pass. What if it's not true? Well, then we have to tell the computer what to do in that case. So argument 3 tells us what to do if the test was false. If C4 was less than 60, then the student would fail. So fail would be in the cell. All right, let's look at one in action. This is another spreadsheet set up a little different from the ones that we saw earlier, but basically I mean, it's still a spreadsheet. You've got your titles, you've got your headings across this, down the left-hand side over there. We're looking here at Xanthan Gum Company. And in order to get a promotion at Xanthan Gum Company, you have to score a certain amount on your supervisor ratings and written test. The bottom part tells us here, to be promoted, employees must score an average of 80 or above in each of the ratings. So look up at the formula bar at the top. Let's look at our if function right here. If, we got our equal sign, if, open parentheses, we got that down pat. B12, and it said 80 or above, right? So here we don't just have greater than, we have greater than or equal to. So that's my logical test. Is B12 greater than or equal to 80? So the computer comes up here, looks at B12. Well, in this case, the answer to that is true. So the logical, the argument to what the computer does if that logical test is true, puts the word promotion right there. What if this person had scored a 79? Now it would say no promotion, because if the test was false, it says no promotion. The other thing I want you to notice about that if function, and you can't really tell it too well, but there are no spaces anywhere in there. All of that is jammed right up next to each other. The only space in that whole function is between the words no promotion, because that's how we want it to look. Everything else is just all right together, no spaces. The other thing I want to point out here on that screen is, here we see the function itself. This is called your formula bar. It shows you the function itself. In the cell, you see the result of that function. So if you need to look at the function, you're going to have to look at it in the formula bar. All right, one more thing I want to talk about before we leave formulas and functions, and this is the hardest thing to get students to understand. Why use a cell reference? I know what I'm trying to add and subtract. Why do I need to use a cell reference in my formula or in my function? Let's look at this example as an investment record. So we're looking at lucrative mutual fund, and in order to get the amount, I had 150 shares at $24 a share. So I know that, and you can see it reflected in our formula, I'm going to multiply, right, to get that amount. Equals B11 times C11, and it gives me the answer of $3,600. So all of that works out just the way I wanted it to work. The important reason to use a cell reference is, what if I buy more shares of lucrative mutual fund? Maybe I bought now 25 more, so now I have a total of 175 shares. Well, if I had just used 150 times 24 right here, or worse yet, God forbid, just put in the 3,600, then I not only have to update this cell, I've got to update this one, and all of these percentages are going to change too, because they're all based on a new total. Whereas using the cell references in my formula, I update one number. When I press enter, this changes, and all of these change automatically. So if you don't use the cell reference, you've missed half of the point of the program. All right, any questions or comments on formulas or functions? Y'all are a lot less chatty than my class yesterday.
Friday.
I know, afternoon at that. All right, let's move on to sort and filter. Here again, two terms, two different meanings. Sort, just like you sort the laundry before you wash it. You put all the whites in one pile, all the colors in another pile, and then the towels and my son's nasty jeans in the third pile. I am sorting the laundry. Same thing here. Rearranging data into a more meaningful order. Filtering, on the other hand, I am looking at the data. If it meets a certain criteria, if it does not meet a certain criteria, I am hiding it. I don't see it. So the same thing is like a water filter. Taking out what you don't need at that time. Temporarily hiding the data that does not meet the criteria. Sort and filter are found under the Data tab. So whenever you first open Excel, usually the Home tab is active. You actually have to click the Data tab to see Sort and Filter, but it's its own little group right there. All right, let's look at Sort first. You have two types of sort, ascending and descending. Depending on what type of data is in your cells, or data are in your cells rather, your ascending or descending sort will be a little bit different. Text data is arranged A to Z in an ascending sort. Numerical data, I have 0 to 10, but you could have negative numbers and they would come obviously before 0. Dates, earliest to latest. Chronological. Descending, everything's just the opposite. Text, Z to A, numerical, 10 or whatever to 0 or negative, and then dates are reverse chronological. So in the two examples I have here on the left example, I have January sales sorted ascending, smaller numbers at the top, larger numbers at the bottom. The right example is just the opposite, descending January sales. In order to sort data, very simple. You click any cell within the column to be sorted. You do not have to select the whole column anymore. In prior versions of Excel you did. Not now. All you have to do is click so that the active cell is in the column you want to sort. Under the Data tab, notice two little shortcut buttons, A to Z or Z to A, ascending or descending. In my example, I did the January sales sorted ascending, so I just clicked the A to Z button. Quick and easy little shortcuts. Notice what happened in my sort though. Everything else on the row stayed together. So when I clicked to sort the January sales, everything for Department 4 stayed together. Everything for Department 3 stayed together. So the whole thing rearranged order, my whole little table there. You can sort on more than one column at a time by clicking on that sort button. We looked at the two little shortcut buttons. If you click on the sort button, the button that says sort, it brings you to the sort dialog box. My primary or my first level sort was the January sort. Again, ascending or descending I did here, didn't I? Yeah, largest to smallest. But I wanted also to sort by the February sales, descending as well. So I clicked the Add Level button, add a level, and then this popped up, this row popped up. So then I could go in and put February, again, largest to smallest. And when I clicked OK, these are my results. So the January sales were sorted first, descending, but notice that departments 7 and 1 both had 2245 for the month of January, y'all see? So then the computer next looked at February. That's why Department 7 came before Department 1, because February had more sales. Department 7 had more sales in February than 1 did. Now the next little slide is just an example of what you can do. Okay, I've got all this great data. I've sorted it, but you can add just that little bit of extra. These are called spark lines. Spark lines. They are new in Excel 2010. Prior versions did not have spark lines. And this isn't really part of today's lesson, but I just threw it in there because you can see now a visual of the numbers. So departments 2 and 6 started off with a bang, but then it was downhill quick. Whereas if you see department 5, they didn't start off so hot, but then they rebounded nicely. 4, boy, they need to get a move on. So that's just a visual of what you've got with your data. A good way to visualize it. Okay? Questions on sort. Let's talk about filtering. Remember, filtering looks at the data, sees if it meets a criteria. If it doesn't, it removes it from the picture. But filtering does not do anything with the order of the data. It just looks at it where it is. There are 3 different types of filter, depending on really what type of data you're using, text or number. This third option, the color filter option, we'll talk more about conditional formatting in just a minute, but if you have something conditionally formatted, then you can go in and filter based on those colors. So that's where that comes into play. But look at your options for text filtering. Equals, does not equal, begins with, or ends with. Maybe I want to see all the students that begin with an A. Contains, does not contain, or then I can customize. Number, the same types of things that we would think of when we think of numbers. Equals, does not equal, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Top 10, above average, below average. So those are our options for filtering numerical data. How do we filter? We're going to go back to the same place that we did for sort. Remember, they're in the same location under the data tab. But this time we're going to click on the filter button. And when you do, you get these arrows next to every column heading, because you can filter each column of data. So next to every column heading, you see these little arrows pop up. Choose the column that you want to analyze, so the column to be filtered, the appropriate filter option, text, number, or color. If necessary, enter your criteria and then click OK. Here, I have filtered the month of June for sales greater than $3,000. So it only shows me the 3 departments that had sales of greater than $3,000 in the month of June. Look at the icon now next to the June column heading. See, it's different. I don't just have the arrow, I have the filter icon there. So that shows me where the filter is. So I can quickly look at that and say, that's where it was. Just like we can sort, apply more than one sort, we can apply more than one filter. Here I filtered February and March. So notice the icons on those 2 column headings both have the little filter picture. February and March sales filtered for less than $2,000. So Department 8 had a huge slump there from January to April. Less than $2,000 both of those months. All right, I've done my filter, and you can print these. If you clicked on print right here, just like this, that's what would come out on your printout, just Department 8. So, like if I were, an overachieving instructor, and around midterm, I wanted all my students to have an individual snapshot of their grades, I could go in and filter and print out one of these for every one of my students. And then whenever I was done, I would still have all of their data. Okay, so when I'm done, I go in. There are 3 ways to clear the filters. I can choose that little arrow on the column heading. It'll say clear filter from whatever you had, January, February, or whatever it was. Clear filter from June. Or I can click the clear button in the sort and filter group. Both of those would clear the filters, but yet leave the arrows so that I could do a new filter. The third option is to click filter in the sort and filter group, and that would turn the whole thing off. My arrows would disappear and everything. So when you're through with all of your filtering and you're ready to just go back to your regular spreadsheet with your data, click filter, and that takes off the filtering. And once you clear the filter using any of those 3 methods, then all of your rows of data will reappear in the order that you originally had them, because remember, the order does not change whenever you're filtering. All right, questions on sort filter? Okay. Our third topic of conversation for today was conditional formatting. And remember I told y'all this was the one that I just kind of threw in because even though Dean Carmichael didn't ask for it, it's still a good way to analyze data, a good way to be able to visualize your data quickly. Conditional formatting changes the appearance of cells that meet a specified condition. So you put in your criteria, and if the cell meets that criteria, it will change the appearance of it based on what you tell it to. Again, why would you use that? To analyze and understand your data by having things just kind of pop out at you, for lack of a better term. A couple of questions that you can answer: which employees have worked for the company for more than 3 years? Libby Richmond was in my session yesterday, so when she gets ready to start awarding pins for the employees who have been here a certain time, she's got to know who's been here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and so forth. So she could set those cells to format an appropriate number or an appropriate color, if you will, to see who quickly had been there for those number of years, whichever one it needed. Or a department having sales more than 4,000 in the month of February. Notice that conditional formatting is under the Home tab. So immediately when you open Excel, you see a little more than halfway down the screen your conditional formatting button. All right, there are 2 types. The first one, the highlight cells rules, formatting your cells based on greater than, less than, equal to, specific text, a certain date. Or top-bottom rules. Top-bottom rules format your cells based on rank. And you can modify that top 5 or top 20 or bottom 15 or whatever. Or top 10%, above, below average. Again, you can change that ranking or percentage. To add conditional formatting, notice the thing a little bit different about conditional formatting is that you do have to select the range for this one. The other ones, we just kind of put chose a cell that had a number in it somewhere, and we could do what we wanted to do. But with conditional formatting, you do have to select the range first. Under the Home tab, Styles group, click the Conditional Formatting button. So for my example of sales, I'm going to look for sales of less than $2,500 in the month of June. So I'm going to go down to highlight sales rules because that was a highlight sales option. Less than. And then whenever I do that, it opens up this dialog box because remember I have to enter my criteria here. I have to tell it what number less than. The light red field with the dark red text is the default option for conditional formatting, so I just left that. We'll look at a couple of the other options in just a couple of slides, but I just left the default option for right now, and then I clicked OK, and there are my cells formatted. Notice Department 3 here, 2577, that's still greater than 2500, so it moves it along. Now Department 9, they had 2345. Well, they come to me and they say, oops, we left out a whole week's worth of data. So once I add that data in, that pushes them up to 2545. What's going to happen to that cell? That's right, automatically, if this range of cells is formatted and I update this number to something that does not meet the criteria anymore, it will revert it back to normal text and color. Okay? So that will, if you update, change automatically. Here are the other examples of formatting. This is the yellow with yellow text, green with dark green text. This column is formatted with just the red, no shading. This one uses borders, and then that one uses shading with no font color. Those were the different options in the conditional formatting box. All right, I've looked at my data, it's beautiful, I've done what I needed to do with it, now I'm ready to remove the conditional formatting. Go back to the conditional formatting button, clear rules towards the bottom, and you have several options here. If your cells are still selected, and you didn't already click off of them, then you can clear rules from selected cells. Otherwise, you can just clear rules from entire sheet and it'll take it off of all of them. There are a couple other options down here, but we don't have a pivot table in this one, so that was grayed out. You can't see it there. All right, comments on conditional formatting. Is that anything you think you can use? These are my resources. Again, my textbook, student data files, and then the clip art. Questions?
This may be off of your topic, so I want, or this may be a lot of fun.
Okay. We can handle both of
If
those.
anybody else has anything first, I may be fixing to work your mind.
We can handle both of those.
Okay. Something that I would like to do, the way that I go into final exams, I keep my grades on D2L. Before final exams, I go through, export them all to an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so I walk in with the grades. And what I've been doing, when someone finishes a final exam, I grade it, put it in there, come here, watch me average your grades, let's not have any arguments later. It would be nice if there were some way that I could have that spreadsheet instead of on a pack of paper that I could write on the computer, where I could type in the final grade. And of course, it would calculate everything. But can I use, is there some way I can use your filter options so that when Joe Blow comes up there and click on his name, I can have only his grades on the screen that he can see?
Yes, using the filter. What you would have to do is filter on that first column that has the student names. And whenever you, here, let me pull up Excel real quick.
Okay.
And I'll show you what I'm.
That'd be kind of a neat thing to do.
I have if I go up here to filter, see at the bottom
Okay.
of that drop down, it tells me
It
everything
lists all
that was
of them, so I
in.
could click.
You could deselect all of those and then select only Joe Blow's name.
Okay.
And then when you do that, only Joe Blow's data is gonna come up. This is assuming that January is a
Well,
column heading, and it's not, but, see. So if where I have January, it says student name,
sure, okay.
you can see how it would have worked.
I'll have to play with this.
Mhm. And, you know, the second part of the description for today was hands-on time will be provided. It was kind of hard to say, bring something to work on. But I have my sample file. I can email you so you have something to play around with a little bit if you'd like. Some people are scared they're going to mess their stuff up or whatever. So if y'all want to hang out, I mean, I can answer questions. We can pull up a file and do a little bit of playing around with it or whatever you want to do. A lot of them yesterday were just ready to get back to their offices so they could actually do stuff, you know, with their own Excel files, and that's fine too. But I can answer any questions or whatever. Yes?
I'm not sure if it was covered in the beginning, but I know one of my favorite options on Excel is when you do one formula for one line, maybe for one student's grades, and then you can just right-click in that bottom right-hand corner of that cell and drop down and move everybody's.
Yes. The autofill.
automatically.
Right here, the autofill option. And that's what I used. I don't know if y'all saw me whenever I filled in, I typed in 2 months' name, and then I just drag that. See, whenever you have months, and it'll fill out the rest of the year for you. If you type like the first 2, I think it is. Otherwise, it would have just copied January all the way down. I didn't want to do that. But that's another neat little option that it'll do too. But yes, if you have formulas in those cells or functions, it will copy it down. And it will change the cell references relative to the next line or the next row.
I figured that out.
Anything else? Well, hang out if you want. Otherwise, thank you for coming. Be sure to take a handout. Feel free to share it with others in your area who may not have gotten to come today. If they have any questions, they can call me too. I'm not selective as far as who I answer the phone for.
Yes, call Rachel.
Yes, I will. Y'all have a good weekend.